Hello, good morning, ladies. Welcome to our gathering of our International Flag this year. I would like to thank you for your attendance, and I would like to announce that our December gathering is going to be early this year, so I want you to mark your calendar on the 13th of December. Because there's a lot of people traveling and there's a lot of people who have commitments. And I also ask you to encourage each other to join in, to volunteer for hosting some lunches. Okay, because I don't have any candidates for the coming months. And we need to encourage members to join in to host one of the events. And we have December, January, February, March. So please, if anybody would like to contribute to this event, that's okay. February is there. So we have December, we have January for the time being. You can pitch in 3 people, 2 people. December 13, Wednesday.
Saturday.
December 13. It's always Wednesday. Okay, I also ask people who have not paid the membership fees to pay the membership fees to Madonna or to Manal Khairat, our treasurer. I also want to emphasize the importance of attendance this year, because 4 attendance per year is going to be mandatory to remain in the club. I'm sorry, but these are new rules dictated by the steering committee of the board members. Okay, one other thing is that I would like to thank our member Sylvia Nakadi for hosting this beautiful event, the culturally rich event. And also to thank her for the nice venue, ZAMALEK Art Gallery, that has been incubating all the Egyptian art and Egyptian artists and doing these marvelous exhibitions for us. Now I will ask Sylvia Nakadi to come and introduce our world-renowned Fikry Hassan, who is going to give our lecture today. Thank you very much.
Hello. الصوت شغال؟ كيف؟ أولاً I want to really say hello to everybody and welcome you to this beautiful place that I love and cherish since a very, very long time actually. I've been connected to the ZAMALEK Art Gallery since I started loving art. I actually even working as an editor-in-chief of a Late, as you remember, all of you, and of course it continued with me through a very long time. ZAMALEK Art Gallery is not only a gallery, it's like a foundation. It's a kind of a cultural hub now, which is being it's a destination for a dialogue, for lectures, it actually inspires our senses and it moves us to beautiful things. So I think that this gathering will be, of course, inspired by Dr. Fikry, who is so شخص معتبر writing. Dr. Fikry Hassan is an academic, professor, archaeologist, anthropologist, and social history scholar, writer, art critic, and artist. As you see, this is his art. His first degree, his first degrees were in geology from Ain Shams University, 1963 to 1966. He obtained his doctorate in anthropology from the USA in 1973 and taught at the Washington State University until 1994. Before assuming the position of Sir Flinders Petrie Chair of Archaeology at the University College London, he returned to Egypt in 2008. Yes. He established and directed the first program in Egypt in cultural heritage management and the French University in Egypt in partnership of the University of Paris, Sorbonne. Thank you. Professor Fikry began his archaeological and geological field investigation in Siwa Oasis, Farafra Oasis, and Tunakada, where I come from, and East Delta, to unravel the mysteries of the origins of agriculture and emergence of state society in Egypt. His works extends to how ancient Egypt and other civilizations cope with climate change, demographic archaeology, and water history. This is something really amazing since a long time. Professor Fikry Hassan is keen in the role of civil society, cultural heritage management and development. Last week, he received the Scientific Merit Award from the International Union of Arab Archaeology. And again, Professor Fikry writes frequently in newspapers and magazines in the field of science, heritage, culture, and art. He has published 3 poetry collections in 2022. He also recently published a book under the name of The Egyptians Between the Culture of Adaptation and the Prospects of Empowerment, in which he presents a critical vision on the characteristics of the Egyptian personality. From Philip, we welcome you. We're very happy you really give us some of your time and knowledge, and we're really looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. To the International Art Gallery for hosting this wonderful gathering. To give me this opportunity to share with you some ideas about art. يعني صوتي من غير حاجه خلاص يعني لو اتكلمت من غير ميكروفون So I was saying that I'm really delighted to be here with this wonderful gathering to share with you some of my ideas about art. I have been particularly keen on, given that I studied Egyptian archaeology, the relationship between ancient Egypt and modern art. A field which has rarely been explored. We have rarely touched upon this amazing connection between ancient Egypt and European modern art, or in fact it's international modern art. To start with, I just wanted to show one of my artworks because it relates to this topic. This is also due to women in particular, because this is a representation of the goddess Nut, and the sun and the stars are every day born through traveling through her body. So the Egyptians, of course, venerated women, and I think it is essential in their mythology and conception of the world. It's a topic we can talk about another time. It's a huge topic. But what concerns me today is actually, as I mentioned, the connection between ancient Egyptian art and modernity in art. I guess you can already see the similarity between an ancient Egyptian New Kingdom painting and that of Gauguin. Incredible similarity, and I'm going to show some of the principles of ancient art and how it resonates with European modern art. So essentially, it's an Egyptian regard for modernity. Well, as I mentioned, this is the kind of thing I want to show, is the similarity in the principles. Because some people think that Egyptian art is just to show the motif, the lotus, etc., etc. But there are deeper principles that are extremely important to realize. One thing, can we turn off the mobile telephones? Thank you. Modernity.
Yes.
I think one thing to keep in mind is that Egyptian art, ancient Egyptian art, is not about ephemerality. It's not about impressions, like you see in the work of the Impressionists. It is about the essential core of things in general, of the universe. And so that's why a lot of people talk about the sense of stability and eternity, because it's trying to capture something beyond what we see with the art. It goes beyond our vision to a deeper world which it tries to represent, which is a very contemporary concept. That's essentially the main characteristic of ancient Egyptian art. One thing, for example, that we can see here is the linear perspective. A lot of people thought that Egyptian art is not good art because it doesn't have perspective. But this is in fact erroneous because it has its own perspective, as I will show, but it is not the linear perspective. It is not the perspective of a view. Because what they thought was that things exist in themselves regardless of the view. So they wanted to eliminate the viewer so that you can see things as they are. And for this, it's indeed an art of eternity. Because eternity is something, it's order, it's eternal order. That's what they aimed for. And of course, that was represented in their tombs. The connection between life and death were actually one, because their world was eternal, and life was only a part of the eternity that will all experience. Another point that I think not many people realize is that Egypt is not just a gift of the Nile. In fact, it's a gift of art. Because art, from the beginning to the end, remained the same, more or less, apparently. This was on purpose, because from generation to generation, art recreated Egypt, Egyptians. So it's through art that Egypt persisted. So here you see a painting from 650 to 640 BC, during the very late period, and you'll see throughout that the same principles exist already, not only 3000 BC, but even before that, as I will show. So here we have millennia of the same art, which bound Egypt together throughout the ages. Well, behind that was the artist. But there is a main difference between Egyptian art and modern art, that there was no cult of the artist, no Salvador Dali in ancient Egyptian art, because the artist has to obey the eternal order of painting, the world of painting. So each painter, whatever his style is, and there is diversity, have to maintain these principles. It's like grammar. So you have rules But within these rules, you can create a lot of different images and positions and so forth. So what kept it alive was maintaining these principles. One of the main principles which we find in modern art, in modern European art, is the unidimensionality. Unidimensionality is that you use flat surfaces. Everything is flat, unidimensional. It's not three-dimensional. Remember what I said about the three dimensions related to the linear perspective. We see the distant person as smaller and one line goes on. No, they didn't want that. Because they wanted to show something that, as I mentioned before, eternal. It does not depend on where I stand, seeing people from different points of view. Like I see some frontal views, some side views. But this should not be the case if I'm looking at the essence of a person. And we'll see how that will lead to something else. It's very interesting that you see this in the works of some of the greatest modern artists. And one of the schools to which at one time Gauguin belonged was the Nabis, the Anbiya, that's what they call themselves. And Maurice Denis, one of the theoreticians of this group, said, remember that a picture before being a battle horse, a female nude, or some sort of anecdote is essentially a flat surface covered with colors, assembled in a certain order. This is like a summary of ancient Italy, done by a European in 1890. Yes.
But the people at the back riding horses, they are smaller than the figure in front.
Of course, they cannot be faithful to every principle of Egyptian art, but what he was saying, that you would see that more or less unidimensionality, there is no artist that would have captured all the principles of art together. So there is no imitation of Egyptian art. And I think there is...
It's not a
Pardon me? As you see, there are many aspects of art, not just the unidimensionality. And every artist attempted to, or his understanding, captured one or two of those in his work. And even among Egyptian artists, none of them is able to, because what you end up with is to reproduce Egyptian art in a fashion that is mimicry, which is not really pleasant because they cannot have the same philosophy. So they approach it from the different principles that are being used. But you will see that more or less the flat surfaces of the persons. You will see the pure color. And I will come to these points. We will see them as we go along. Next. Here. Part of trying to capture the essence of an object or person is to use a composite structure. So we'll see that the head is profile, the chest is frontal view, the legs are in profile. So they created, this doesn't exist in reality, as you see in on the side. If we do the views, none of these would be like what the Egyptian art shows. So they created this because they wanted to show, as I mentioned, the essence of a person. Next. So we'll see here also one of those in a side view, where in fact here is another composition on the original composition, is that even the breast, which is shown in a frontal view, the breast is shown on a side view. Next. And it was also traditional until the 18th century to render the 2 feet with the toes showing, which also another deviation from the regular perspective, because what you see one toe if you're looking at the side. But here they had a frontal view on the side view. So it's really ingenious when you look at it, and you usually overlook it because when you look, you do not realize that there are certain principles that they were dealing to maintain this essentialist view of reality. Next. So the use of these views was not consistent for every object, because every object has its own essentiality. So they would use the frontal view for the head of the al-buma, the owl, and a side view for the falcon. Here, for the beetle, you have a top view. Neither frontal nor lateral. So what they wanted is to get everything the best, what you will recognize immediately a thing of. Next. And this did not just start in the New Kingdom in 500 BC or 1800 BC or 2000 BC. No, it started already with the beginning of Egyptian civilization, and we see it from the Mount skeleton. You see in armor, the same thing, the head, the profile, the chest, frontal view. And you can see details of this in the variety of objects being shown. Next. So, where do we see the composite view in modern art? Whenever you think of Picasso, you think of the face being shown both in front and side. Next. Another element of this, because if you are looking for essence, then you are essentially talking about iconicity, something that recognizes. Next. Which you see like in the idea of the brand of Apple, or what Andy Warhol tried to show with Marilyn Monroe, tried to show here, even though it was different versions, essentially he's maintaining a certain essence of what Marilyn Monroe is in the variety of ways. Next. Then we come to the perspective. And instead of the planar perspective that we have seen in the Renaissance, they had a perspective based on the repetition of objects or creatures or persons, one behind the other. So this way you get the sense of depth, but at the same time it's very flat. And does not have the three-dimensional aspect to it. Next. So here you see the comparison between what we have seen from the Nebo Amun tomb and a work by the futurist Natalia the cyclist in 1913. Same concept of the planar repetitive perspective. Next. Here is a really beautiful example of this. It's absolutely wonderful. Next. We see this, and we see the futurist. This is the futurist movement by Bala, Giacomo Bala, in 1912. And this was a movement started in Italy to reflect the dynamics of other society and industry. So we get to see in ancient Egypt they had this. And we will come actually to how they treated movement, because you see this also in terms of movement that will come to that as well. Next.
This is of course on the wall. This is
yes, the wall
this is on
paintings.
campus.
No. They didn't have art in ancient Egypt was not for display like this. This is a European idea, but they had it on the wall of the tomb. Maybe you should. Your group should arrange a visit to some of those artworks in Saqqara, for example. The thing that is also characteristic and had an immense impact on modern European art was the use of pure color without shades. You see the different characterization of this, maintaining a pure color, and also use of line, sometimes black and sometimes. And here is, of course, what I attempted in the works I created, try to capture this principle, but maintaining the solid color. Of course, they were using something like tempera, and what I used was, in order to ensure this, the purest of all, is to have colored sheet papers used. So this is taking it to the step where you really have uniform, pure color. Of course, this allows you to work with both contrast and complementary colors, as you can see next. Of course, one of the greatest masters of modern art is Henri Matisse. You see the similarity in the approach and the colors. Not to mention the pose of the lady as well. But here, of course, he is not using the Egyptian composite, he's just using the profile. But as I mentioned, every artist captures one aspect of these principles and works with it. But you can see no, it's not an imitation. It's not sometimes even. Sometimes, well, we'll come to that. But essentially, how did they arrive at this? This is a question we'll keep at the end, because it's a very interesting subject. How did this correspondence happen? Next. The Matisse fascination with color, of course, was evident in his early work, but was still connected with the early post-impressionism, and so this is the focus is painting. But you can see also the beginning of the use of areas of pure color even in the same face. You can very common in many of the contemporary artists this approach. So of course, between Matisse and Picasso, you essentially have modern art, which we already have shown. Next. Another one of the Nadi's, which also was related to Gauguin, is Emile Bernard, and he also used the monochromatic approach in his landscape. You will see that he is not using the Egyptian perspective. But the colors, of course, even the scheme is very close to the Egyptian one. Next. We come to the one I showed before by Gauguin. Not only did he use the pure color, next, but he also used the same arrangement that we see. Next. Back. No. Next. Next one. Can you see? Next. Next. Incredible, huh? I never realized that there was such a resemblance between Gauguin's work in Tahiti.
She's saying he didn't see it. He didn't see it. Sure. No, he definitely.
We'll have time for discussion. Keep your questions. I'm sure you'll have a lot of interesting ones. Next. But even the movement of the hand, the movement of the hand is very similar as well, not just the position. Next. Next. And here we move to another area that developed out of the post-impressionism of Van Gogh, Gauguin, and Matisse, which is abstraction. And we begin with figurative abstraction, as you know, then we go to geometrical abstraction. So here is geometrical, here is figurative. Can you hear me in the back? No?
Yeah.
Yes. So figurative abstraction, you see just the outline of the person and the uniform color. In this case, it abstracted the human figure to be just a shape. And I think you want to think of this one when people say that Egyptian art is not about movement, it's static, it's if you look at all the different movements that are being shown here. Next. Then, Matisse in his later life, after his early stage of the vivid colors, etc., and he was ill and had to stay in bed, and got his assistant to, and you see the similarity of the inspiration that I had from Matisse going back to ancient Egypt, the connection between the two. And so essentially, they are called cutouts. You use color paper and you cut it and you paste it. Next. Here we just made a rendering of his colors from blue to the ochre, the brown ochre, to see the similarity of the Fikry Hassan artwork on the European. Next. And we can see how far back in time this goes, because we already see in the Awinat cattle breeders from the Awinat ways in the southwestern part of Egypt. Next. And we see it 3,500 BC, before the emergence of the Egyptian state in the Ghazian pots. You can see those in the Egyptian Museum, and you can see the same abstraction here, using one color, the brown ochre. Next. Here you see another scene of that. You see the ostriches and the boat and the human figures right on top of the boat. Next. And then we see Paul Klee. And of course, he was inspired by art because he came to Egypt and stayed there, and we'll see how many of those people came to Egypt and how did they get these ideas about ancient Egypt and ancient Egyptian people. Next. Then we go to movement. Already showed you the work by Barla, but also one of the most famous paintings of modern art, which is the by Deschamps, Louis descending the stairs. See the planar perspective, you see the same. You also see a repetition here with the movement in the way. Even more startling is another one of the masterpieces of modern art, Picasso's Le Demoiselle d'Avignon. Next. With the exception, of course, of the African mask that he is used. Next. Next. Here we move also to another dimension of contemporary modern art, symbolism. Can anybody figure out what this is? What I'm showing here? Guess. Well, it's a cow head. And the hands are the horns.
Yes.
And out of that is the stars. So this is it is the prototype, because this is also Ghazian. This is before the rise of the state and formalized religions. So we see the beginning and the story of cows, fertility and eternity and women is an endless topic which I've written on. That's another subject of tremendous interest, the relationship with women and cosmos. Probably that's why the origin of the word cosmos. Cosmos. Next. We see in Paul Gauguin, of course, the use of color for symbolism, but also we see in one of the oldest texts in pyramid texts, the use of the color green for the writing. And because green is the color of life, so therefore this is symbolism of how the deceased will live more or less forever. Next. Then we come up to something very interesting because again everybody says in art, everything looks the same. But in fact, given what we have talked about, because of these solid and strict principles, they can still show emotions. So here is Picasso's, Goethe and Chimy's, one from ancient Greece. Now I'm changing that one so you can see the similarity closely. The work of sadness or reflection, which you get in this particular. Next. And here we can see the expressions of sorrow. Note the variety of work that is introduced to avoid the sense of repetition and the stagnation and stability, which many people think doesn't exist in Egyptian art. The way the different levels, the way they looking at each other, looking in the same direction. So it's really incredible masterpiece.
It's depicted from one.
This is in Luxor, in the two Next. You compare that with the scene of Maurice Denis that we talked about, showing the funerary scenes, both capture the sense of sorrow, but I think the Egyptian one is probably more evocative and more emotional in its apposition. Next. Emotions of love and affection. Next. Next. A mother and her child from ZAMALEK and incredible.
Painting the kiss.
Next. And then even surrealism, because with this idea of the composition that we create from the parts of the same person, then why not? Since the whole world is the same, and humans and animals are the same, belonging to the same universe, then we can mix. And through this mixing, it is not the serialism that we know about, just hallucinations of dreams or subconscious mind. No, this is a different kind of surrealism. This is maybe rational surrealism with the oxymoron, but it gives you an imaginary world, a fictive world that doesn't exist in reality. So it's a metaphysical surrealism in that sense, creating people that have different kinds of heads of different animals and so forth. Next. Next. No, can I see the one before, please? So here we move to something else, which is essentially the connection between text and picture. And they didn't really make that connection, this separation, because with them, as I mentioned, everything is one. Writing and paintings, because we don't even have a word for a painter. A painter is a scribe, who's also a writer. So, and you know that the hieroglyphs are paintings. So in a sense, for them, text and image were one thing. So they could mix them very freely, as you see here, next, and here, next. And we see, of course, in Life magazine afterwards, next. We'll also have to look for the geometry behind Egyptian art. That's another hidden dimension, because with the flat surfaces, with the pure colors, all about purity in the sense, they end up with a mathematical geometrical mind, because they have always thought that everything in the world is based on geometry. The universe is geometrical. We are geometrical. And in fact, with a triangle, you can create all shapes. So they thought of the triangle essentially as the origin and the origin of all shapes. At the same time, it means that everything is the same. It can be reduced back to geometry. So from the triangle, you can make a square, you can even make a circle. And so we see that that's another dimension if we go into the geometry and how it reflects in many things, but the least of which is the pyramid. But you can see how they can use a grid. So the proportions of the body are actually governed by a certain geometrical code. Next. Here we see also the different proportions of the person standing, different from the one sitting. Next. And of course, more recently, in European art, we see the combination of this geometry in a variety of ways, even with the beginnings of Illinois and Casimir Medvedich, and in Montreal. Next. Pure abstraction, essentially. And I guess with the right, you see the triangle, which maybe of the body that you have seen is a continuation of this dimension. So it doesn't have to look Egyptian with a lotus or something figurative, but it can be Egyptian even without the figure. Next. You can see here the geometry, the greatness of. That's how these things appear. We have shown you these fragments of an incredible world of painting, even in one and two. Next. Now, this I did not realize until actually I was in Paris, because I never connected Rodin with ancient Egyptian art. But then, when I was there was this exhibition, and I walked in, and it appeared that he was receiving collections from fellow archaeologists in Egypt and modeling his great sculpture on the basis of Egyptian art. So this is the grave Egypt. Next. Then another discovery was Japanese. So there was just a recent exhibition. Before I didn't see this one, but I want to see it when I was researching this work. And so they also had an exhibition about Japan. So even these great figures that we never connect with ancient Egypt had, in a way, a relationship with ancient Egyptian art. Next. So the question is, this similarity, is it due to coincidence? Somebody wakes up and does something very similar to something else? Or is it convergence? You start from one point and you end up at the same point because your mind leads you in art to a certain purification of the colors, several other colors, so maybe different people into it. Or is it inspiration? Maybe you have seen that and were inspired. So what I wanted to show now next is how would these artists know about ancient Egypt? So I found out could be, first, because of the publication of the Stone in Egypt early on, the end of the 18th century, and that was with beautiful illustration of ancient Egypt with watermark. So that was one. Immediately after that, Napoleon put his collections of the things that they got from Egypt in the Louvre. Then we had the British Museum, because all the museums in the world were acquiring collections of ancient Egypt at that time because of what what came to be known as Egyptomania, obsession with things Egyptian, something exotic, something different. By contrast to that industrial, dull, gray world, so they found something really wonderful and great. So they ended up not only the museums acquiring, but also many of the private collections were acquired, like the one that was used by Rodin. Then there was accounts by travelers. Then by traveling actually to Egypt. And then by universal fairs in Paris and London and everywhere else, where they had Egyptian sections. And then through the different archaeological collections. Next. So here you see a painting of Napoleon in Egypt. This is dated 1867, well after his trip to Egypt. Next. Then we have the book that actually created Egypt in the mind of Europeans all over because of Napoleon's stature and his adventures all over Europe. Next. Then we have the Louvre in the 18th century with the Egyptian collections, as you see. So if you were in Paris, which was the hub of modern art at that time, you would walk into the Louvre and got your inspirations. So you didn't have to really go very far. It was available. So what I'm saying is that there was a possibility that they would know about this art. Next. Also in the British Museum, the same thing. Next. And in Berlin, same thing. So if you're in Berlin or Vienna or anywhere in Europe at that time, you will see something Egyptian, even in Sweden. Next. And here, in fact, is a piece that was found in Sweden. So all over Europe, from Paris to Sweden and Norway, you would see things Egyptian. Next. Then we had travelers that came to Egypt. Most of us are familiar with Edward Lane, but Sophia, because the role of women is usually marginalized in historical writing, but you see this lady who came to Egypt next and wrote a book on ancient Egypt, so that also all these traveler accounts brought ancient Egypt to the attention of Europeans. Then these are the fairs, like Egypt in Paris in 1889. Even for the occasion of this one, Paris tried to show their industrial greatness, built the Eiffel Tower for this occasion. And Egypt was very well represented in this exhibition. Next. Then, with this obsession with Egypt and ancient Egypt, many painters tried to show scenes of what ancient Egypt was like. So that was already going on in 1885. Next. Then those who came to Egypt, and they included Emile Bernard, that we've shown some of his work. Next. And in fact, this is one of his works when he was in Egypt. This was like what an Egyptian painter would have done nowadays. You see the women with red and so forth. Next. No. These are the serious modern artists. So different from the Orientals. These are the people who came and they lived in Egypt. And one of them also is Van Gogh. Most of these are very famous European artists. And he made the figure here, also with Egyptian covers. Next. And Paul Klee. He was in Egypt in 1928, 29, and he really didn't want to leave the Egyptian Museum when he was there. And we see the influence of the colors, the pyramids, and so on. Next. Thank you.
Thank you for lecture. If anyone wants to ask Dr. Fikry any question, please feel free to do that. Any questions for Dr. Fikry? Of course, after this beautiful lecture, I only have much more appreciation for the Egyptian artists or the European artists because they did all this on rocks. I mean, with all the details and everything was not on canvas like
That was natural paint, they had the rocks.
Exactly.
Very limited material.
So I'm still very anxious, please.
Thank you very much. It's really interesting. I live in Berlin, and the name Karl Friedrich Schinkel is definitely someone known to you.
Yeah.
And I was once stunned in a town in Brandenburg to find one of the churches which he constructed. He was the architect of the German emperor in the 19th century, where the whole ceiling of the church reminded me of Egypt Air ceilings 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Stars and blue sky. And even for the Magic Flute opera, he constructed
Absolutely.
You know, do you think this was because you said that, is it by chance, or did he know about it? I was
No.
always wondering since years,
No.
how could this...
No, it was not by chance. As I mentioned, there are a lot of sources.
he was
that
born
we've seen.
in the 18th
But
century.
there was something else other than the actual seeing objects from Egypt. But actually, more importantly, was the idea of ancient Egypt. And what was the idea of ancient Egypt? The idea of ancient Egypt was that there is this idea of the cosmic order, and the cosmic order entailed justice and entailed beauty and goodness and knowledge. So the Greeks realized the importance of ancient Egyptian knowledge. And that was the core that was transmitted to the Europeans during the Renaissance.
He's born in 17 something. When I
I
think
said
this,
the Renaissance.
the sky that was known only after the discovery of the Valley of the Kings. I mean, this yellow, blue and yellow.
The point I'm trying to make is that from early on, the 15th, 16th, 17th century specifically, the start of the movement of the Freemasons, because you mentioned Mozart.
Yeah.
And this was a movement against the Catholic Church because they belonged to get rid from the medieval legacy. So the alternative they find was not in Greece, was not in Rome, but what the Romans and Greeks said. They said, go to Egypt. I have a whole lecture on the relation between German idealism and ancient Egypt. That's another story. Another story. But in fact, not only the paintings, but you will be amazed to know that the principles of the modern German state was based on Egyptian ideas. It was. I have a whole lecture on that. Okay. Another question?
Yeah, I just want to always confuse between what are the principles, what is the implication, so, and what is the inspiration. So, there's such, it's so confusing sometimes. What we see, we feel like as if it was imitated. For me, it's just inspiration.
Yeah, well, this is a very interesting thing about how do we make a painting. For example, here, this is no imitation. There is nothing like this in ancient Egypt.
No,
There's nothing like this in ancient Egypt. But you need to realize that because the important thing was the idea. The way the idea is represented in the principles I mentioned. So this follows the principles and evokes that sense even without using something figuratively Egyptian. So as I mentioned, you have like rules. When you talk, we have a rule. We follow these rules, but within these rules, we can make the changes. Like if you say good morning, or in Arabic, صباح الخير, صباح الفل, صباح whatever, مساء الخير, مساء الفل, مساء النور. All of these are based on a combination that's a rule relationship, but you change the word, but the structure is the same. At the same time, the domain of the change is limited, like sabah, masā, or the other one is something related to quiet. صباح النور, صباح الفل, صباح الحنين. So there are principles and domains, and within that you create something very different, but essentially based on a very, very simple concept. Thank you.
Okay, ladies, before we start to meet our food, we can have 5-10 minutes to socialize here with some more food and refreshments. Okay, and today I want to announce that it's Nora Zofi's birthday. She's with us. Happy birthday, Nora. And last but not least, I would like to thank very much Dr. Fikry. I tried to get something to eat that is very artistic. It is run by the student in an association for the Hassan and the I hope you're going to like it. It's a memory from Club 4, International Club 4, and also for India, Sylvia, thank you for the lovely government. Okay, so let's spend some time here. Books, Dr. Fikry's poetry books are on display over here. Have a chance to have a look. And the tour, there is someone who's going to help you identify any of the artists, as well as Sylvia. Of course, we can go around. We have an exhibition here and we have another exhibition on the ground floor. So let's avoid the some refreshments and some food.